Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. First item will be the roll call. Could you call roll, Claire, please?
Vice Chairman Lonnie Leslie.
Here.
Member Robbie Tejas. Here. Member Stephen Verdeel. Here. Member Matthew Elbers. Mayor Mike Morris.
Here.
Member Jamie Martinez. Here. You have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, the first item would be the approval of minutes for the April 4th, 2023 meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes as presented?
Vice Chairman Leslie, I've submitted a couple of changes, please. For under also present was Amanda Brungart, the airport director, and Claire Burrows, the assistant city manager. Mr. Holwell was not there.
Great, thank you for catching that. Any other corrections? Hearing none, do I hear a motion that we approve them as amended?
I make the motion.
Thank you, sir. I have a motion. Second? Moved and seconded that we approve the minutes as presented. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'll abstain from
Okay.
that vote, given that I wasn't here.
Thank you, sir. Old business would be the discussion and recommendation regarding the site plan for the new terminal construction.
Mr. Chairman, I can take the lead on that if you don't mind.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Holwalt.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, members of the board, first off, I apologize for not being in attendance at the last meeting, as the mayor and I had a civic leaders tour out at Cannon Air Force Base, and we're unfortunately busy at the same time, so it's hard to be both places at once. So I was provided the feedback and the questions and comments regarding the site plan and the floor plan from the last meeting. And since that time, I had the opportunity to go back and visit with our design consultants with Moles & Corbin, as well as discuss the overall thought process of what we are trying to accomplish, and with the available funding that we're trying to accomplish this with both Amanda and with Lee, and as well as Vice Chairman. And so kind of just wanted to start with the site plan this evening and talk about the changes that we have made, as well as address some of the comments from the previous meeting. So if everybody can pull out their site plan, hopefully you have it in front of you. So the first thing that I really want to point, and is very important that you'll notice on the site plan, is there is a diagonal line that runs across the page, runs across the taxiway there. You see it go adjacent to the existing terminal. That line there is very important because we can't cross it with the building itself. And so when Moles & Corbin from our previous meeting started shifting the building, we'll say to the right on the page or to the east, they wanted to leave us some room to where we could, if we ever needed to, expand to the east as well with the terminal itself. So they didn't want to encroach completely on that no-go line, otherwise known as, I'm going to call it the RVZ line. Don't ask me what that stands for. But so they wanted to leave us some room in there, and so that's why they only shifted it as far east as what they did. On the west side of the page itself, or on the left side of the page there, where the gates are, you'll see there's plenty of room for us to expand the gates in the future if we needed to. And so that was some of the reason why they only shifted the building that far to the east. Since the previous conversation, we've also gone in and looked at the access road between the proposed terminal and the existing terminal. And so you can see on this particular layout, we've actually changed up and didn't include access from the loop road back to the aprons. We included an access road from the new apron to the old apron. What this would allow us to do is, from a security standpoint, keep that behind the fence line, which then would allow us from a maintenance standpoint to go back and forth between the two aprons themselves and not have to get out onto the taxiway. The other thing that this would do is allow whatever air carrier is in place the opportunity to potentially store their equipment over on the old apron space, which would not impede views, et cetera, on where the new terminal is. Another question that came up during the previous meeting was the requirements as far as the threat levels are concerned and from a parking standpoint. And the requirements from how close a vehicle can be to a terminal is based on what that threat level, the national security threat level is. And so you'll notice terminals all across the nation have parking adjacent to the buildings themselves, except for obviously drop-off and pickup areas where you cannot stay permanently parked. What happens is the threat level increases where a permanently parked vehicle can be has to become a farther and further distance from the terminal. And so what we would do from an operational standpoint is if that threat level did increase, we would simply just barricade off whatever distance we needed to. Either working with our streets department or with a contractor to get those barricades in place should that threat level increase. If there's existing vehicles that would be still behind those barriers, I mean, we would have to take measures, tow them out of the way, et cetera, get them over into the long-term parking, whatever we need to do to address those situations. So as far as the site plan and where the parking is located, that we don't need to move the parking to meet that ultimate threat level. Simply because we have other alternative measures to be able to address those concerns that we have. So that was kind of the thought process behind where the terminal was laid out, how the parking lot was laid out. We made the adjustment to the maintenance road in between the two aprons. So I want to kind of pause there, give you an opportunity to reflect on it and try to answer any questions that you may have regarding the site plan itself before moving into the floor plan.
One of the things that we talked about last meeting, Mr. Holwalt, was potential parking for the restaurant if we have someone that's, we were just discussing if, say, there was a Rotary meeting out there or whatever, where would those cars, where do you project those cars would park that would be going through those side doors on the restaurant?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And so what we would do and what I envision obviously is with the parking that's on the loop road there, that we could potentially reserve some restaurant parking spots on that north side there. On the aerial, you see there's vehicles already parked in those that are being used by the existing terminal. Then, of course, you could still have access to the short-term parking if people wanted to utilize the restaurant itself.
Okay.
So.
All right, good. Thank you. Other questions, gentlemen, or discussion? I assume that we have a representative from Moulton Corbin. Do you have any comments, please?
Yes, gentlemen, members of the Civil Aviation Board. I think that Justin covered it really well. So we have no comments.
We are having a great deal of difficulty hearing you, sir.
Maybe if I speak up,
That's better.
we have no comment. Justin did a very good job of reading what we've got to get to this point.
All right. Anything else, Mr. Holwalt?
No, so let's, Mr. Chair, if we move on to the floor plan itself and look at some of the modifications based off the feedback that was received. And so starting with the restaurant itself. So on the previous floor plan, if you recall, it was on the east side of the facility. However, it was limited to, say, what we're going to say is the southeast corner of the terminal itself. And so what they've gone ahead and done now is expanded the restaurant area to take up that entire east half from, say, north to south along there, which then, of course, would allow us the ability to put glass windows in on both that north side and the east side of the building to have a great view of the airfield itself. They've also gone ahead and included, from a perspective standpoint, where a kitchen could be located, as well as it looks like restrooms that they went ahead and added into the restaurant itself as well. Ultimately, what would happen is we'd probably build a shell for the restaurant itself, and then once we potentially have either at least for somebody to operate, then working with that leasee on what the actual kitchen requirements may be for themselves. So not knowing what the kind of kitchen setup they would need, we would work with, like I said, that leasee in the future on what it could potentially be.
Okay.
Because we moved the kitchen and took up the entire east side of the building, we've also revised where the CVN main workshop is, as well as the workshop storage. And in discussions, I know that there was some conversation regarding where an air carrier could store their equipment or things. Well, this would be an opportunity for us to utilize that space for them to store it. One of the reasons that we don't want to show it as a potential leased space is that when it comes to funding terminals in the FAA, they limit what funding can go towards leased space. And so by us showing it as tenant or as by the sponsor of the airport, they will pay for that with FAA funding. And so like the airline ticket offices that are over there, FAA, since that is leased space to a carrier, to a tenant, they typically will not fund that. And so we want to make sure that we're getting as much funding through the FAA that we possibly can. The other reason that I want to leave the administrative offices and break areas that are related to the airport is that currently we're trying to get all of this funding through the FAA to get a terminal built. We do have vision for the FBO and what the FBO could be. We don't have funding to make that vision come to fruition. And so, of course, trying to continue to progress at the airport itself, we want to take advantage of utilizing as much FAA dollars and as much state aviation dollars as possible to get as much built. If we get all these office spaces built, that allows us to free up potentially what we utilize the existing mobile home for, because we'd be moved out of there. It gives us more opportunity to utilize that FBO and not limit ourselves and fill it all with administrative offices. To be honest, I mean, the FBO could eventually hold other air carriers that don't need TSA. And so if there's an air carrier that wanted to come in and provide service from Clovis to Albuquerque with a smaller aircraft, they could run that out of our FBO. And so we don't want to limit ourselves to office space in its entirety within the FBO. And like I said, take advantage of those FAA and state aviation dollars. Those were the major changes that from the last time you saw the floor plan to now, as well as just a little bit of insight on what we're trying to accomplish with the available funding and some of the restrictions that FAA puts on that. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, I sure appreciate the work that was put in on the restaurant. That looks great. You know, you were talking about building a shell, Mr. Hollowalt. Would we stub out some plumbing since it's, I would assume, a slab floor? Would we attempt to do that?
Yeah, there's going to be some obvious things that we need in there, floor drains, et cetera, and plumbing, which would make sense on certain walls and maybe where flat top would go,
Right.
Where hoods would need to go. And so there would be some of those things that we would try to accommodate.
Yeah, and the restrooms too. Yeah. All right, good. Questions, gentlemen, or comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor?
Got to push the button. Mr. Chairman, Member Martinez and I were chatting prior to the meeting, and he pointed out from the minutes in the last meeting that there was discussion about reaching out to other entities such as Denver Air Connection to ask their opinion on these things. Has there been time to do that?
And Mr. Mayor, no, we have not reached out to other entities. A lot of times, I mean, your air carriers are tenants at an airport. And so they're actually not, other than the ticket counter, they're not utilizing the airport terminal itself. And so, no, we haven't had time. The other thing that's important to remember is we are trying to put ourselves in the best position for next grant opportunity. So, trying to get the plans to a place and hopefully 100% completed by the time the grant opens up, potentially late summer, early fall. And so, trying to keep the project moving forward. Sometimes we want to make sure that we can agree on a floor plan to continue to move forward.
Understood. Appreciate that. Thanks.
I was noticing the conference room, Mr. Holwalt, Mr. Mayor. I took a tour of the Frisco, Texas new library, and the mayor was taking us through this committee my son serves on, and he was talking about how one of the things that they saw being used more than virtually anything else other than checking out books and doing research and all that was conference rooms, that there's lots of organizations in a city, whether it's Frisco or Clovis, New Mexico, that need conference rooms. So I think that'd be another way that the city could help organizations and get more folks out to our airport. I also have I'm kind of interested in if we could get some naming rights on the restaurant. I've thought of Key Lime Cafe, and then I've also thought of Key Lime Pie in the Sky. Kind of like that one myself, but it's kind of wordy. But
Well done, Mr. Chairman.
you
Well
can
done.
you can take those or leave those. Yeah. Other questions or concerns, comments?
Mr. Vice Chairman, I do have a question. When we're talking about the restaurant and the infrastructure required for the different types of restaurants that may go in there, do you think maybe we could consider a local restaurant? And I'm not going to say Leal's out loud, but something like that that could branch out there very easily. They would know what their infrastructure already is and just have a branch out there.
Yeah, and so, I mean, ultimately what we do is work with, I like y'all's vision, and you're thinking about restaurant names and who those restaurants could be. And we would have to just maybe put it out for like an RFP and see what kind of responses that we would get, because from the processes and the procurement procedures that we have to go through.
Amanda and Lee, I'm sure you've had a chance to look at these plans. What are your thoughts?
I definitely think this is the best option, and I know you and I have met with Mr. Holt, and I agree that this looks really good, and I definitely like the design of the restaurant as well as the addition of the service road. And with that service road, it also allows easier access for the fire department if there's any issues. They don't have to worry about waiting for traffic on a taxiway to go through to get to the emergency. So it provides a lot of benefits having this direction.
Yeah, great. Lee, do you have thoughts or comments?
I like it. I think we can make it work.
Okay, great. Anything else? Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
I was actually signaling Member Cordell.
I was trying to push the button here.
Oh, okay.
Okay, there we go. Justin, I like the explanation on the funding. It was very enlightening. I didn't know the FAA broke it out the way it did. And I assume, I'm happy with what we have here. It looks good to me. I'm sure there'll be some little tweaking going on before we finish. And then could you explain the funding going on from now?
Yeah, certainly. And so Correct. This is, once we get into the details and get to the detailed design, you know, the walls may move a little bit. You know, the exact layout may change just a little bit, but this gives our architects something to get started on. In regards to the funding, of course, it's through the FAA, through the infrastructure bill that was passed. It's the ATP program, the Airport Terminal Program. And so, which is set up to try and make improvements to airports. And so what we have done and put in 2 grant applications for the terminal previously. The feedback that we have received is that you're not far enough along. You're not far enough along. And so since that time, we have been working with our ADO, Andy Vallejos is his name, in Fort Worth, and having monthly meetings and tracking this project. So then he is actually providing updates to his supervisors to let them know, hey, this is coming. And so this next application, like I said, should open up at late summer, early fall. We'll put in the full request with FAA for $14 million. I have spoken with the state aviation department because this last legislative session they received $55 million in appropriations and said, hey guys, hey, don't forget the city of Clovis, we're working on this terminal project. And they said, well, we still want you to go ahead and apply for the $14 million. If the feds can't come through with that full amount, we will definitely want to step in and provide funding to cover the gap. And so they're not committing to a number, and we're going to go ahead and work with them as well as the FAA on what our grant application would discuss when it comes to that, how we word that on our grant application. The nice thing about the state funding is it doesn't have the restrictions that the federal funding has. So that lease space, tenant space in a terminal, the state can pay for that. And so that's where we'll actually have to break this down eventually for the FAA on what is tenant space, what is common area space. You see the TSA that's in here. TSA actually does pay us for a lease. However, FAA will still pay for TSA leased space. And so there's all kinds of little rules that go along with terminals, but that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay, and in the meantime, while we're waiting on the funding stream, I guess Molson Corbin will continue to do some preliminary work, I guess, infrastructure stuff.
Well, the city of Clovis has actually already provided 100% of the design funding for this. And so Molson Corbin will take this to 100% construction plans for us.
And I would assume that would be very important where we would have a good number when we apply.
Absolutely correct. So hopefully when we're at 100%, right now we're using price per square foot concept and not having the detail of plans to be able to generate a great opinion of probable cost. We will be at a point this next application cycle when we're putting that together for a funding request.
That'll be great.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Yes, sir.
So, just further to that, Mr. Howalt commented that he's been through 2 grant application cycles on this project and received the feedback that we're not far enough along. I think that's part of why they would not approve the grant application, because the numbers aren't real tight until all of the design is completed. And so, I want to take the opportunity to applaud and thank Mr. Howalt for all of his work and diligence to stay with this. I know you've made trips, or at least one, to Dallas, and you're working closely with the folks at FAA to make sure that we have a tight application. And this is an important step in the process. And I think it's just incredibly exciting that we're talking about a new airport terminal, and we haven't just dreamed this up. We need it because of the growth and the activity that's taking place at our airport. And our airport is such an important piece in the puzzle of quality of life and economic development and all of those things that are important for our community as we keep growing. So, thanks to this board and you board members for your vision to call for this and move this along, and your work on this, and of course thank you, Mr. Howalt, for everything that you're doing on it.
Yeah. Lee, we appreciate you've kind of kept everything going multiple times, and just since I've been on the board, so sure appreciate you, and we certainly look forward to working with you, Amanda. Thank you. And Claire, as usual, thank you for everything that you've done too, and especially Mr. Holwald. So we appreciate all of you. Anything else? Yes, sir. Steve?
Do we need to send a recommendation now from us to the city council?
Yes, please.
Yep. Do I hear a motion that we approve the plans as presented?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we approve the plans as presented.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Jamie, is it? Yeah, second? Oh, Mr. Tejas, excuse me. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Same, opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion carries. Do we have other business for the good of the order this evening before we adjourn? Okey-doke. Hearing none, I adjourn the meeting.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Oh, good. Thank you, guys.